Hey guys, how are all of you doing? Hope fine, and yes, this is the next part of Game of Shadow in Naruto world. Where I am in the Naruto world. I have a name that isn't mine and I have a really nerfed version of the gamer. Is that all? Am I forgetting something? Right, inventory. At that I received yet another disappointment. Let's start without any delay. Taya. It wasn't often that she woke up early without someone or something waking her up. Actually, she couldn't remember when the last time had been, if ever. She wasn't what one would call a morning person, she could tell you that. Mornings are fucking evil, she grumbled to herself as she twisted, ready to continue sleeping. At least, she would have, if she hadn't heard someone else move and decided to check what was up. What she saw made her freeze. There, twisting where he laid, was IG. Their leader, fearless leader himself, twitching and whimpering like a small child, pale and sweating. Taya could honestly say that she had never seen the boy look so afraid, small and weak. She'd always seen him as the strongest one around. Even when they had been standing in front of the Sushikage, IG had this aura that made him seem just as important, at the very least. She was both annoyed and in awe of that particular aspect of him. That had been one of the reasons that had convinced her to follow and obey this boy. That, and the absolutely terrifying genjutsu he'd put on her, that is. The memory still sent a shiver down her spine. A few seconds were all that she had experienced, and if she never got to be under it again, it'd be too soon. Regardless, she'd gotten to know who IG Sata was much more since then. She learned that she'd never have to worry about that unless she made some really bad decisions. Moreover, she'd probably earned her way out of IG's list of possible targets and into the one that would never be put under the genjutsu. She was almost sure of that. Thus, Taya laid there, staring as fearless leader looked anything but the nickname she'd given him. She was suddenly reminded of what he'd done, what he'd risked. IG had taken a bomb that would have leveled the entire place and made them all disappear and risked his life to get it away from all of them at the risk of himself. She'd thought he'd shrugged that off. He seemed to be perfectly fine after he came out of the hospital. Four Eyes hadn't mentioned anything to them either, besides the physical problems IG had dealt with during his recovery. Now, she was witness to something that she hadn't even thought was possible for him. Weakness. It happens often, she heard, and she turned once more, this time to look at Kabuto, who seemed to be on watch duty that day. The silver-haired Mednin was staring at their team leader with an almost blank expression. At least, if it weren't for the slightest of frowns on his face. I haven't asked the others, but I'm pretty sure it happens every night at least for a while, he added, his voice soft, to avoid waking up everyone else. Taya stayed silent then, unsure of what to say. Shrugging it off or dismissing it sounded wrong in her mind. By itself, that was already pretty strange, in her opinion. She'd never cared much for that kind of thing, but then again, nobody had risked their life for her before IG. Saying it was nothing was like saying that saving her was nothing, which might explain why she felt as she did in regards to that. However, that reasoning also sounded wrong to her. Was that it? Was she just trying to keep the importance of IG saving their lives, hers included? That sounded like belittling the action. You are here because I have a proposition for you too. Hey, at least the music is nice. Well, if you need help, I know a thing or two about genjutsu. Nobody but me will be able to see through your genjutsu by the time I'm done with you. The world will fear you. Nice job, Taya. If this team works out well, maybe I'll try to keep it. Lots of memories rushed through her mind then. From the moment she'd met the fearless leader with Jirobo to all the time she'd spent with him in the team. She remembered all the time he'd taken from his own training to teach her. She remembered all the times he'd complimented her genjutsu and her music. She remembered what he'd told her not so long ago. You guys will continue to be my team. Can we do something? Teuta asked, her voice almost inaudible. She thought it likely that Kabuto might not have heard her at all. However, just as she went to repeat herself, louder this time, he replied. We try and ease his burdens, Kabuto answered. We become stronger, so that he can worry less. She would have laughed at that idea not so long ago. How would them being strong make IG feel less concerned? Surely it would make things worse, right? But it wouldn't. The boy, for some unfathomable reason, trusted them. The people that had attacked his village and his family, however indirectly in the latter's case. And your music, Kabuto added, sounding slightly amused, although the smirk on his face had little mirth behind it, his eyes still fixed on the twisting IG. He enjoys it. I think it helps him relax. It did. IG had commented on that at some point. Said something along the lines of her music helping him calm down. It felt like so little help though. Surely there would be something else they could do, right? I'm IG Sata, Kabuto continued then, his eyes unfocusing. I like my friends and I hate anything that endangers them, he recited. IG told me that once. That's how he described himself. Teuta listened, even though she wasn't sure where the silver-haired boy was going with his words. Do you think we are in that group? His friends? He asked, and she found herself unsure. You guys will continue to be my team. Maybe, Teuta replied, looking away. She didn't want to believe that. However, there was a little voice in her head that kept asking if maybe, just maybe, it was the case. Could it be? Oh. Tumrai. She had a lot in her mind, if she was honest. The team was moving, approaching Konoha at a rapid pace now that IG could go as fast as he wanted, without leaving them all behind, at least. It was almost funny, how they had to slow down for him while he recovered, and now that he was back in peak condition he had to do so for them. Regardless. The speed they were going at made things more complicated for her, since it meant she'd have less time to think. And she needed to do it a lot. What would she do once they were back? Would she leave the team and go back home to her brothers? Help Gaara BK's kid? Surely he needed her help. Also, her brother would need help in case Akatsuki went after him, and now Tumrai had information about them courtesy of IG. She'd be able to help him prepare, in case they went after him. Or she could stay in the team, continue to hunt Akatsuki to make sure Gaara wouldn't even need to face them to begin with. Work with IG to eradicate the organization before they could even think of going after her brother. That was something she could do, and it was the one that had the most chances of success. She loved her brothers and her village, but Suna wasn't in the best of conditions at the moment. There was a reason they'd gone for a desperate move such as the invasion, Orochimaru influence or not. IG though, had proved that he could do the job. Tumrai wouldn't let his condition and how the battle went fool her. Her team leader was keeping cards close to his chest. She was fairly sure IG could have finished the battle almost as soon as it started. The only reason he hadn't was because there were bigger threats to worry about in Akatsuki, and this way he saved his best weapons for them. And her current leader was also making her stronger. Well, the entire team, really, but the point stood. She hadn't been weak before, she was sure, but she'd also been nowhere near as strong as she currently was. Her repertoire hadn't grown, but her skill and power certainly did. If she stayed longer, surely she would become even stronger, right? That would increase her chances if she had to face Akatsuki without the team to help her brother. However, if she stayed, she wouldn't be there with Gaara in case Akatsuki went after him before they could deal with them. How would she feel if that happened? If she lost her brother because she wasn't there? How would she feel if she lost her brother because she was but wasn't strong enough? The more she thought about it, the more she was sure there wasn't an actual correct answer to any of her questions. She'd still have to decide though, which was the worst part. Oh. Kabuto Yakushi. He was growing more and more confused. However, that was a good thing, surprisingly enough. Kabuto could almost feel how his identity solidified as time passed. It was something he'd always been aware was missing, but at the same time it was a hole he hadn't noticed. Or maybe it was more accurate to say that he hadn't realized how important what he lacked was. A strange concept, to be sure, but that was as well as he could explain it. Now though, he was feeling it. Small things at first, like petting and interacting with Yuki. Kabuto was almost sure that he was a dog person. He'd take Ig up on his offer to visit the Inuzuka vet when they arrived to Konoha, something that Kabuto had decided almost on a whim. He found those were the best decisions, after all. Choices that he made without thinking it over, without trying to associate them with a mask or a thought-out purpose. He knew he couldn't go through life thoughtlessly, but those were the times he was sure it was a decision made for himself. Kabuto was starting to take those as foundation to build his identity, to fill up in his mind who Kabuto Yakushi was. Small decisions such as those turned into bigger ones, like defying Ig and enforcing the team leader's recovery process and ordering him around during it. Telling a man that he was absolutely terrified of, no matter how he also looked up to him, what to do. Doing so being fully aware that he could drag him back to a hell that he never wanted to experience. He'd taken a last step, one last attempt at seeing if he could be himself, when he had decided to try and get Sasori in the team. It was a dangerous move for several reasons. For one, Sasori was one person that Kabuto had met before, someone else that wanted to use him like a tool. For another, the Akatsuki member, or now ex-Akatsuki member, Kabuto supposed, could be a concern for everyone in the team. Lastly, and more importantly, such a move could put Kabuto back in Ig's bad side, something that he thought he'd never even think to risk. He'd still done it though. Because Kabuto had confidence that nobody would ever want to go against Ig after experiencing his particular brand of hell. In the end, he'd been proven right, even if Ig seemed to have some doubts about him now. It didn't matter though, because Kabuto knew the boy wouldn't find anything to turn against him. It had been terrifying to do all that, but also liberating. Kabuto had done it all because he felt like it was what he had to do, it was what he wanted to do. He'd thought others were wrong before, Danza, Orochimaru, all of them had done something he didn't agree with at some point. There were also times where Kabuto thought he had ideas that would help. He'd never done anything about it before though, because he had a role to play. Not anymore though. He was only Kabuto Yakushi to Ig and he didn't need to play the part of anything else. It was disconcerting, confusing, frightening. However, it was also freeing, in a way. He could do whatever he felt like doing with no risk of Ig saying it was unnecessary, or useless, or a waste of time. Kabuto almost thought experiencing the void was a good trade for what IG was giving him now. It was almost enough to pay for him finally being able to be himself, or try to, at least. Almost, but not quite. That didn't mean he held it against IG though. He could understand the position his team leader had been put in. He could reason it and see why and how it had all come to be. IG himself had explained it all to him when he'd asked, without even hesitating. Regardless of it all, Kabuto was unlikely to ever be put under the genjutsu and he was eternally grateful for that fact. Now, he could focus on living his life as he wanted, on seizing the chance he'd been given to take off the masks he'd worn for his whole life. And he had IG to thank for it all. He wouldn't forget that. Oh. IG Sata. Man, now this is a good sight, IG exclaimed, looking at the vast woods in front of him with a wide grin. This was how home looked. Green and brown for as far as the eye could see. Life everywhere, with birds and trees and plants and the occasional insect and mammal. How I had missed this. Nothing against Iwa's imponent mountains, but he much preferred the lively look of the forest around Konoha. Then again, he was biased and he knew it. It didn't make it any less true that he preferred that sight. It was a matter of opinion and his opinion wasn't likely to change. We know, fearless leader Teiya pointed out with a roll of her eyes. You haven't shut up about it since we left Iwa, before that, actually. Not even you can ruin this for me, Teiya IG replied, smile still in place. He took a deep breath in then, closing his eyes. He'd never gotten over that slight joyous feeling that filled him whenever he did that and focused on it. Breathing would always be one of the pleasures in his life, he knew. Just like the void would haunt him forever, the feeling of his lungs being healthy would always fill him with happiness. Don't tempt her, Jirobo advised, but IG just waved him off, still relishing the smell of the forest. She can try. Won't work, he said then, turning towards his team just in time to see Teiya considering the challenge. And if she annoys me too much, I can just up the training, he added, taking the wind from her sails. Everyone's training, he continued then, grinning widely as the redhead started sweating under the team's glares. Then, he turned towards the woods once more. Say, which's better, Iwa or Konoha? Iwatamurai blurted out, clearly not having expected the question. Then, IG saw her pale. I mean, it's, you see. Smooth, bimbo, smooth, Teiya mocked, earning herself a glare from the blonde. Iwagakure looks similar to Sunagakure, that's why. Suna has less mountains and more desert, but there's a lot of rock around too, the fan user explained, trying and failing to not look nervous. IG, for his part, nodded with a hum. That makes sense, I guess, he mused. He should have seen that coming, actually. What about the rest of you? He asked then. Iwagakure too, for similar reasons, Yujito admitted, almost shyly. IG guessed they really didn't want to insult his home, but they were also trying to be honest. He got it, but it was silly. He couldn't get angry at them for that, honestly. Even if they were wrong. Well, I don't know where the hell you two see the appeal of seeing nothing but fucking rocks, everyone, Teiya spat out dismissively. I prefer the forest a lot more. At least it has some damn color and life to appreciate. Foul language aside, I agree with Teiya, Jirobo commented, looking like it pained him to share his opinion with the redhead. I think I'm biased, but I prefer Konoha too, Kabuto mused, although he looked slightly surprised for some reason. Why, IG didn't know, but he'd just roll with it. Man, at least I have people with actual taste in my team. good to know. Got a little worried there for a second, he said with a sigh in relief. Excuse me. Both blondes exclaimed then, outraged. With that said, IG started then, laughing as they glared daggers at him. Let's get on with this, I want to go home. You are all invited for dinner, by the way. He'd have waited for Sasori's answer, but he, and the rest of the team, had learned quickly that the man wouldn't speak unless absolutely necessary. Most of the time only when addressed by IG himself or under his orders. It created some friction within the team, but he hoped it would change with time. With some luck, that wouldn't be just wishful thinking. It'll be a pleasure, IG Kabuto replied with a smile. IG, for his part, narrowed his eyes as he tried to tell if he was honest or just humoring him. Have they actually eaten a meal made by me in a kitchen? He wondered, and he wasn't sure. He'd have to make it happen, it seemed. Sure will, he nodded, in the end. I'm a great cook. Just behave yourselves or I'll make any training you've gone through look like a warm-up. With his team suitably threatened, he hopped on a tree branch. Oh! Eventually, the team found themselves approaching a set of Konoha's gates. IG's grin widened then, before he started chuckling and then cackling. It was so very fitting though, he just had to laugh. Fearless leader finally lost it, huh? Taeya asked then, sounding like she'd expected that to happen. IG had to wonder how much of that was a joke, but at that point nothing could ruin his mood, he was sure. IG. Tamrai, for her part, asked, slightly concerned. Nothing, he waved off, getting his laughter under control. It just, something caught me off guard, he explained as he continued walking. Man, of all people, I should have expected you to take the gate guard mission. Somehow, I didn't though, he said out loud towards the Guardian. IG. Shikamaru asked, snapping into a sitting position from where he'd laid resting his head on his arms over the desk. You are back? He asked, looking more awake than was normal for most Naras. The spiders didn't say anything about your mission being over, Shikamaru said then, narrowing his eyes. Don't know what you are implying, IG shot back with a wide grin, lying through his teeth. Of course he'd told the spiders to keep the secret. He wanted his return to be a surprise. How have you been, Shika? He asked then, his expression softening. I've been living the life, the Nara replied, relaxing on his seat. The group's been trying to take missions inside the village, mostly. We're keeping Naruto company, since he isn't being given any missions outside. Sasuke and Kiba get a little antsy from time to time, but everyone else is fine. Thanks for telling me about the others too, IG told him with a grateful smile. Of course Shikamaru knew he wanted to know as much as possible about the group. How about you tell me how you've been? The Nara prodded, his eyes going to IG's hair, which he'd decided to have cut short and faded on the sides to fix the damage done by Deidara. He knew that it'd give him away instantly, but what could he do? He grinned wryly. Don't suppose you'll believe me if I say I just chose to change style? IG asked, because he had to try, right? The unimpressed raised eyebrow he got from Shikamaru answered that question by itself. Things got a little out of control, he started, ignoring the snort behind him. I'm sure I can tell all of you once we gather at home, yeah? He offered, because he really wasn't looking forward to telling the story so many times. For a long moment, the Nara stared at him before simply sighing and slumping where he sat behind the desk. Why'd you have to go and become troublesome, IG? He asked with a long-suffering tone. You used to be nice to have around. This world is troublesome, Shika. It's what it is, IG commiserated. Because he'd really have preferred for things to remain as peaceful as they had been when they were in the academy. So, you were working on an original technique, right? How's that going? It works now, Shikamaru said with the slightest of smirks. Which on him might be the proudest, most excited he'd ever seen the Nara be. I'm still tweaking details though, because it's not really usable just yet, he added with a sigh. It's how it is. From there it'll be easier if you are still up to the challenge, IG reassured, earning a grimace instead. Yeah, no, I'll leave at this, honestly, Shikamaru replied before looking behind IG at his team. Guess you have to go, huh? We have to report at the Hokage building, yes, IG confirmed with a sad smile. We'll see each other as soon as you get off from here, yeah. I have to try and look for the rest. Is anyone not here? No, everyone's here. You got here just in time too. Kiba was talking about getting something to do outside, even if only for a few days, Shikamaru explained as he started going through the paperwork to let them pass with IG. You know how he gets. Yeah. Guess we can spar so that he can let out that energy, yeah? IG asked, a grin forming on his face. One that widened as he saw Shikamaru start to sweat. Everyone can participate too, of course, he added, making him pale. Oh, you poor bastards. I almost pity you, he heard Teiya mock behind him. I said everyone, IG said simply, almost laughing when he heard a smack behind him. He didn't need to use web sense or senjutsu to know what had happened. Well, I'll report to the higher-ups and hunt down the rest of the group. Probably ditch this bunch somewhere in the middle of that. Bitch, please, we'll ditch you, Teiya shot back, before he heard another smack. As if that were true. He might put a good word and ask for them to continue being part of his team, but there was no way Konoha would let them roam around unchecked. Chances were that he'd be held responsible for anything they did and expected to keep an eye on them at all times. Tamrai pointed out just that, which prompted Teiya to shoot some insult at her that IG decided to ignore. From there, Yujito joined, voicing that they were both children. Why? IG had absolutely no idea. They just seemed to love having something to argue and fight over. With a sigh, he pinched the bridge of his nose. Shikamaru then regarded the group behind him and IG could almost hear the complaints in his mind. Really, his team was the very definition of troublesome, or the women were, at least. He'd just realized that the males in his squad were mostly calm, in comparison to their counterparts. I'm definitely not saying that though, he decided then and there. I pity you, IG, the Nara said, and IG gave him a tight smile. Let's get this over with, he grumbled to himself. Let's go, he said, making them all nod. At least they listened. Thank God for small mercies. It's good to have you back, IG, Shikamaru said, leaning back on his chair and giving him a wave with a half smile on his face. It's good to be back, Shika. I see, Hiruzen said simply, leaning back against his chair and taking a drag from his pipe. IG stood straight, in front of the man with his team behind him. They remained silent throughout the report, which he knew must have been hard for Teiya. Is something the matter, Hiruzen? IG asked, calling the man for his name for the first time since he arrived. The silence had gone on for just a little too long. There was something going on with the old man. We've been trying to get more information on Akatsuki, Hiruzen started. Not really replying to his question, IG noticed, but maybe he'd get there. With what Orochimaru gave us before you left and what little we already had. We'll add what we get from Sasori now, he added, his eyes fleeting to the puppet master. That had been a fun introduction. IG was sure he noticed the ambu guards around the room moving when he said that. It was a split-second thing though, so he might just have imagined it. Regardless, the Hokage had yet to express his opinion on that besides a raised eyebrow. Regardless. We've picked up on something, Hiruzen continued, and things clicked in Ige's mind. You want to send me on another mission, he hazarded a guess, a frustrated smile on his face. Can't say that was what I expected to be told when I came back. I'm truly sorry, Ige, but Akatsuki is moving and we have to react, Hiruzen said, looking like it pained him to do so as his face twisted into a grimace. I've been trying to deal with it. Get more information, mobilize our ninja But. Ig prompted, more than a little annoyed. Maybe he was taking too many liberties here, but he'd thought he'd get some resting time in between missions. A break to use to get stronger, relax with his friends, check on his family and maybe try and forget about the looming threat. No such luck, it seemed. But Hiruzen nodded, giving him a sympathetic look. We've been spread too thin as of late too. I've been coordinating with Kiri, who are still nowhere near recovered enough to deal with this group, and Suna, who are in the same situation, really. Most of my forces are used between those two. And here, with Naruto, Ig realized with a grim expression that grew even more strained as the Hokage nodded. Of course. You are no normal child, Ig. I'm sure you know that, Hiruzen told him, not knowing just how right he was. The old man started before pausing, closing his eyes and sighing. I never thought I'd have to send children to fight in battlefields like this again, the Hokage said, looking about as old as a person could get. But here I am. So. Do we get to know how much time we have? Ig asked then, looking at his leader, resigned. What point was there to question Hiruzen? He knew the old man. If he thought this was the best course of action, chances were that it was, even if he didn't like it. And what our next mission is about? I've gotten reports about suspicious sightings near Takegakure, Hiruzen informed him, and Ig nodded. Fu then, huh? Also not from a big village, so that makes sense. Everyone else is on guard, they might just wait and see if anyone lets their guard down. Or until Pain decides to pay someone a visit. As for time, we are still trying to get confirmation on this intel, Hiruzen told him then. It might even be a false alarm, for all we know. It wasn't. Both of them knew it wasn't, but it was a nice thought, at least. It was a shame that it seemed like the most probable course of action that Akatsuki would take. They might not like it, but life rarely worked like that. Permission to speak, Sasori said mechanically behind Ig, who closed his eyes. He knew what was coming already. He knew what the puppet master would say. He sighed. Go ahead, he said, after sharing a look with Hiruzen. It does sound like something Akatsuki would do, the man informed them, making the two of them grimace. It also fits some of the potential plans that had been shared beforehand. Because of course it did. I see, Hiruzen muttered with a stiff nod. We'll need you to share all that you know about them with us. I gave a report to Sata already, the puppet master replied, his voice devoid of emotion. Still, the words themselves carried a certain tone behind them. Sasori, you'll go with the intelligence division and tell them everything you know, Ig ordered without turning around. They are better equipped to get that than I am, and they might find something that Onaki's people didn't get. Of course, Sasori agreed immediately as Hiruzen raised an eyebrow. Onaki, ha? The Hokage asked, sounding almost amused, which was a nice change from the seriousness of the conversation. If only they could keep that levity though, but... Permission to speak, Teiya requested, almost mimicking Sasori's tone. She didn't manage to hide the underlying joking tone though. For a moment, Ig considered telling her to keep her mouth shut. He didn't know what she wanted to say, but he knew it would be useless to the conversation already. Go ahead, he repeated instead. With all due respect, old man Teiya started, showing instantly that there was no such thing as respect in what she was about to say. No surprises there. If there's anyone that can make Ig call them anything but what he wants, then I've yet to meet them. Hiruzen burst out laughing. Is that so? He asked, looking at the boy amusedly. Because I remember people having to force Ig not to call them in an overly respectful manner. Oh, do tell, the redhead prompted, and Ig just massaged the bridge of his nose while hearing the rest of the team sigh exasperatedly. Even Yuki. Oh. Ig blinked, looking ahead. Next to him, Naruto glanced excitedly between him and the person he was introducing him to. Meanwhile, the girl in front of him fidgeted nervously. This was certainly not what he'd been expecting, that was for sure. Can you believe it? Naruto asked, apparently unable to deal with the silence of a few seconds. I'm not alone. I have a clan and a family, the boy said excitedly. I'm happy for you, Naruto Ig said in the end, giving him a smile before turning back to the girl. And it's nice to meet you, Karen, welcome to the family. With that said, he started, looking at the blonde next to him and narrowing his eyes. What's this about being alone? I come back from a long mission and you immediately dismiss our friendship. Our brotherhood. That hurts, right here, he said, placing a hand over his chest. Ig-too, you know what I meant. The blonde complained, making him chuckle. Let's go in, yeah. I gotta see if we need more food for tonight. There'll be a lot to prepare. God, I've missed this place, Ig told them as he walked towards the kitchen. Do you have any preferences, Karen? Any allergies? Anything you really like? Ramen. The girl said hesitantly behind him, and Ig groaned loudly. Please, tell me I don't have two Narutos now, he pleaded to the skies. Oi. What's that supposed to mean? The blonde in question protested. Do you need any help? The red-headed girl asked, following Ig to the kitchen as he started checking their stock. There were a lot of things missing, but that was to be expected. He was more surprised that there was anything at all. He'd half expected Naruto to just empty the place and then go from there. That would be appreciated, Ig accepted easily with a smile. Although, his eye twitched when he saw the girl's cheeks pinken. Lots of things to buy. How have the villagers treated you, Karen? If you don't mind me asking, that is. It hasn't been too bad, the girl said hesitantly, which he took to be that it had been worse than it should. People were idiots, indeed. Doesn't matter. I'll do the shopping and you can help me prepare stuff, how does that sound? He asked her before turning to Naruto, who was grinning from ear to ear at the kitchen's door. Hey you, stop smiling like an idiot and take note of what I have to buy, yeah. Only thing he can do without burning down the house, most of the time, at least, Ig said, that last part muttered for Karen. Ig. It was one time. The blonde protested, even as he went to do as told. One time too many if you ask me, he mumbled as he rolled his eyes. Thank you, Karen said, her voice filled with emotion. Ig turned to regard her for a moment. She seemed moved, in a word. A watery smile on her face as her eyes welled, shining in the light. "Don't mention it," he replied softly. "Any family of Naruto's is my family, simple as that," he explained with a grin. "Now I don't have to suffer alone, at least." "Seriously, that guy's a nightmare sometimes." "Ig," said Blonde protested once more. Karen and Ig, meanwhile, shared an understanding smile. There was silence then, before Ig's grin vanished. Turning his head slightly, he saw Naruto still standing at the door. The blonde looked at him, a sad expression on his face that was quite the rare sight, considering his personality. Ig got it though, because his eyes were on his hair. Then he looked at him. "That's not a change in style, is it?" his brother asked softly. "No, it isn't," Ig admitted, turning back to what he was doing. "I'll tell everyone tonight, if we can get them all here." "Okay," the blonde replied simply. "So, what do we need?" Naruto asked, some of his cheer coming back. "Oh. Hello there," Ig waved casually as he walked into the Hyuga compound. The guards had very different reactions, he noticed instantly, even if he wasn't even looking at them. One of them sighed and deflated while the other moved towards him. "Don't bother," the first one told the second. "What? Why?" the guard asked incredulously. "Does he think he can just?" "That's Ig Sata," the first guy said, as if that explained anything at all. "You don't wanna know what the main branch will do if you hold him up." "Ha, didn't even know that was a thing," Ig thought to himself. He'd just walked in because he honestly couldn't bother with the waiting. He wanted to see his friends and he wanted to do it as soon as possible. Hinata and Hanabi were sure to be in the Hyuga compound, so that was the first place he'd gone to. He'd see where the rest of his band of brats were at later, since he'd probably actually have to look for them. "I'd be more surprised if they didn't have something set up for you," Hakai commented, amused. "You've basically trained both their heiresses as much as the system has. You are also already a very influential figure. And you could probably kick their collective asses," Kij added. And that Hakai agreed, even as she sighed. "I guess that's true enough," Ig acknowledged as he made his way to the girl's house. Naruto and Shikamaru seemed to be about the same as he remembered them. He wondered if Hinata and Hanabi were too. "Ig, you were away for a few months, not years," Kij said, and the boy could almost see him rolling his eyes. "You are being a bit dramatic," Hakai reluctantly agreed. "Okay, fair, Ig sighed. "I'm like that, I guess," he grumbled to himself. A smile formed on his face, however, when he felt a wave of comfort coming from Sachigumo, together with an encouraging bark. "I knew you were my favorite for a reason, Sachi." "Wow, don't you know you aren't meant to have favorites, Ig?" Kij asked, sounding unimpressed, but Ig would bet he was having fun. "I mean, I'm sure we can make an exception for you," Ig shot back with a slight smirk. "True," Hakai agreed, making her sibling sputter indignantly. "But what about me, Dad?" she asked then. They were definitely having fun. They never called him that unless it was to joke around after all. He just rolled his eyes. "Why don't you give your siblings some love, Sachi?" he asked, receiving an agreeing bark, and then his mind filled with protests. He just tuned them out as he continued on his way. Eventually, he found himself outside the girl's house. After knocking, Ig just waited for a servant to open. He was already planning on what he would teach Hanabi next, if she was progressing well with her threads. Maybe check with Hinata for her medical training. That would be best left for when Kabuto was around though, he supposed. Satasama, the person that opened the door, greeted him. Please, do come in, she added, and IG blinked. That was different from the ways he'd been received on previous visits. For one, that was a much more respectful way to refer to him. For another, they'd always gone to check with Hayashi before letting him in. Hesitantly following the woman in, he was led to the small training field that Hinata and Hanabi trained at. As expected, that is exactly what was going on when he arrived. He blinked, however, when he saw both of them going through the katas mixed with wire control that he'd taught Hanabi. Well, this is unexpected, he voiced then, making both of them tense up. In the blink of an eye, he was being tackled to the ground by a small, black-haired missile. IG. You are back. No, I'm still at Iwa, he said flatly, even as he wore a smile on his face. Just asked someone to henchers me, obviously. Idiot, she told him, giving him a poke with her fingers on his abdomen. Which, considering she was a Hyuga, hurt like hell. I missed you. Everyone's missed you a lot, IG, Hinata said as she approached him, much more calmly than her sister. Although, she looked very much amused by Hanabi's actions, if the look on her face was anything to go by. Welcome back, IG, he heard then from Hayashi, who apparently had been sitting off to the side. It's good to see you, well, the man added, giving him a nod. Which was a little surprising, both because of how warm a welcome that was, coming from Hayashi himself, and because the man didn't comment on his daughter's behavior. However, both of said girls frowned then, looking at him up and down and then intently at his hair. What's up with that? Is it so weird? There's no scars or anything, just a haircut. IG, you've been in this world for around 3 years and not once did you change your hairstyle. I think they can be excused for having suspicions, especially considering how this mission was described to them, Hakai explained patiently, and IG reluctantly agreed that she had a point there. Of course I do, she added smugly. I take it the mission went well. The Hyuga clan head asked then, as if asking about the weather. It did, IG decided to summarize. No need to speak about his near-death experience just yet. So, how have things been going around here? He asked, smiling stiffly under the narrowed gaze of the two Hyuga heiresses. They've been going well, Hayashi continued, surprisingly. IG had half expected him to be done with the small talk and just leave. Tell me, IG. You are aware of how my clan operates regarding the branches, aren't you? He asked then, out of nowhere. Surprisingly, the boy didn't see any of the two girls tense up or react in any way. They'd always done so whenever the topic of their family's seal came up. Now though, there was barely any reaction at all. What the fuck did I miss? Maybe a few months is a long time, he heard Kij mumble, just as confused as he felt. I am, IG replied, looking around at the three of them, unsure. Did something happen? You could say that, Hayashi commented, almost smiling, which in turn almost worried IG more. I'm in the process of convincing the elders of the family to change how the clan operates. That single sentence made his eyes widen. Does that mean what I think it means? Pretty sure it does, Hakai confirmed. How? IG asked, incredulously. Don't get me wrong, I'm happy, ecstatic, but still. It's not a sudden change, Hayashi said, sitting where the wooden floor ended and the ground of the training field started. Looking at Hinata and Hanabi, IG sat next to the man, while they sat on the other side. I've been working on this ever since. I've been working on this for a while, the man explained. Ever since Hisashi. I don't remember anything about that, Ig thought to himself. There's nothing about that on your notes, I can tell you, that Kij informed him, which only made him frown. Things had been complicated for a while though, Hayashi continued, and Hinata's lowered head told Ig all that he needed to know on that front. The girl's troubles to improve had impacted the clan head's efforts, he supposed. That changed through the last few years. I've been making progress, lots of it. I'm glad to hear that, Hayashi Ig replied with a smile, before he looked towards the training field, just like the man was doing. But this isn't just to tell me that, is it? He realized instantly, letting his face clear of any emotion. It isn't, Hayashi confirmed, but remained silent for a while before speaking again. What I'm trying to say is that it's all thanks to you. You brought out the best in Hinata and Hanabi, the clan head told him. You may not get it, but that strengthened my position a lot. You also showed me what alliances can achieve, even in the most unlikely of situations. Ig was sure that with alliances the man meant friendships, but sure, that worked too. In the back of his mind, Hakai and Kij chuckled at that. So did Sachigumo, but he didn't know if she got the joke or was just laughing with them. Thanks to you, I've almost completed what has been a life goal for me, Hayashi said, taking a deep breath in before letting it out in a drawn-out sigh. I owe you, Ig Sata, and I repay my debts. I've been informed that it's likely you'll have to leave for another mission soon. Before then, I'll teach you to the best of my abilities. Oh. That. I don't even. Ino struggled to come up with the words to express herself. All around, his friends seemed to have a similar struggle. Except his team, of course. Those were either politely ignoring his conversation with the rest of his group from Konoha or, in Teiya's case, unashamedly stuffing their faces. His group from Konoha, though, was quite another thing altogether. Some seemed horrified, some wore pained expressions, and others looked resigned. In the end, the one to break the silence and Ino's babbling was Shikamaru, who sighed and massaged his eyes. And you said there's another mission you'll have to go on? The Nara asked with a not angry and resigned tone. Probably will have to go on, Ig corrected, but judging by everyone else's expression, he knew they were of the same mind as him on that. It was a technicality, practically. That didn't mean he appreciated Teiya barking out a laugh at that. Troublesome, Shikamaru muttered, palming his face. The rest of the group sighed, apparently sharing the sentiment. It is what it is, Ig told them with a sad smile. We knew things would be like this when we signed for this career. Yes, Naruto agreed, but he didn't need to be a genius to know there was a but coming. But we thought we would all be in the same position. Not that you would be sent into dangerous missions and we would watch. Well, for what it's worth, I'm sorry that I worry you, guys, Ig apologized. Doesn't mean you'll stop, does it? Ino asked, sighing again at him when he shook his head. Guess we'll just have to deal with it. I'm guessing we can't accompany you on these missions. Shino asked, intently looking at his team members. You can't, Ig denied instantly before he could even consider it. He knew it wasn't a possibility. You are all people that this village needs for the future, he explained, looking at them all. Konoha can't lose any of you, it'd be devastating. I'm not like that though. I'm strong and I'm capable, but if I die, the village won't suffer as if one of you did. His friends looked outraged at that. Well, most of them did. There was one that looked like he'd stabbed them in the chest. It was what it was though. Better they got used to how it worked. I hate that you are right, Shikamaru all but hissed. You aren't going to die though. Because I swear I'll find a way to bring you back and kick your ass if you do, he threatened, and IG got the distinct impression that he was 100% serious. And considering it was possible. I have no plans of dying, he reassured them all. I'm just explaining why you can't come with us. And you were very smooth about it, fearless leader Teiya praised. Very smooth indeed, she added with a snicker. He just rolled his eyes at her. On a different note, IG started then, his face turning from grim to grin in a second flat. He had lots of practice masking emotions, after all. I noticed something curious just now, he started, turning his head slightly. That was when two of his friends started squirming as all eyes turned in their direction. That seating arrangement is new, isn't it? He asked. Both Naruto and Hinata, who were sitting very close to each other in comparison to the rest of the rather big group of people, turned red in the face. The latter much more than the former, but they both did. No. Naruto tried, to which IG just gave a half smile and a raised eyebrow. We were talking about you, right? Right, guys? He asked, quickly turning to the rest of the group. Judging by their expressions though, they looked ready to throw him to the wolves though. Oh, it's been great, Ino exclaimed, making Naruto and Hinata turn from embarrassed to horrified. You wouldn't believe how much we had to push them so that they finally stopped dancing around each other. We even had to have Shikamaru make a plan in the end, because they just kept being stubborn. Ino, I don't think it's... How do you manage that though? IG asked, interrupting Hinata before she could finish. His eyes found the Naruto, who looked about ready to just drop and pass out with how done with the situation he seemed to be. Apparently, that hadn't been a fun time for him. Well, lots of threats and bribery, of course, the blonde girl explained cheerfully. Of course, he agreed with a chuckle. So, how about you? Found a girlfriend while you were out almost dying? Maybe one of your team members? She asked then, looking at the three women in his team appraisingly. IG just laughed at that. He'd almost seen that coming, honestly. Almost. He wishes, Teiya shot back with a cackle. Tamrai, for her part, groaned, the smallest of blushes on her face, probably out of embarrassment. Yujito simply raised an eyebrow at Ino. But let me tell you, bimbo number 3 dash. Excuse me. There was this rather amusing thing with the Sushikige's granddaughter, you see, Teiya continued undeterred. Oh, do tell. Ino prodded with stars in her eyes, previous outrage already forgotten. IG was just happy that his friends were being distracted from the rather grim conversation from before. Maybe it was even on purpose on the Yamaneka's part, but he wouldn't know about that. Regardless, he'd just have to do his best and enjoy the peace while it lasted. After dodging, IG's foot connected with Chaoji's abdomen as he sent the other boy flying against a tree. Immediately after, he jumped up to avoid a clawed sweep of Kiba's, which he responded to with another kick, this time down. The Inuzuka's face got very familiar with the ground right then and there. Looking down as he landed, IG raised an eyebrow at the way his shadow was connected with another. Then, he directed the expression towards Shikamaru, unimpressed. Hearing a familiar chirping behind him, IG didn't even turn around as his wires rose and wrapped around the running Uchiha that had charged at him. How's that going, Shino? IG asked then, feeling the bugs on him trying and failing to drain his chakra. First, because he had a decent recovery rate, and second because Sachigumo was the one actually fueling his techniques. That meant that the only thing working against his energy pool were the bugs, and they weren't precisely fast even if his Abraham friend had gotten much better in his absence. "You are as ridiculous as ever, IG," the quiet boy replied, pushing his shades up. "Or more," Shikamaru grumbled to himself before sighing. "You up for it, guys?" IG blinked as everyone around him nodded. From Chaoji and Kiba, who were still recovering from all the hits they'd been taking through the spa, to Sasuke and Naruto, who were both strung up in the air by his wires. The latter of which had been the first to be taken out as he donned on his orange seal armor. "Born ready, Shika!" Naruto exclaimed as everyone's shadows connected with Shikamaru's. Meanwhile, Ige's was the only one that disconnected. "What's that about?" he thought with a frown. If it went to allies though, one simple idea came to mind. "Does everyone and their mothers?" His thought was interrupted as Chaoji and Kiba rushed him instantly and much faster than before. "Have a boosting jutsu now," he finished as he blocked both of them with one arm each before pushing them away. As for the Uzumaki and the Uchiha, they freed themselves from their thread prisons with sheer force alone. It was something that they probably didn't need help with all that much, IG was sure. It certainly helped though. Even Shino armed himself with kunai and rushed at him, his bugs still working tirelessly to drain IG's reserves. "This is fun," he thought to himself as he dodged, blocked, parried, deflected and countered the attacks coming his way. Even Sachigumo was excited, it seemed, as she broadcasted her delight to him. "Aren't you gonna actually attack?" Kij asked casually as if he weren't in a battle against a small group of what he was sure were overpowered children. Not that he was one to talk, but IG was sure he didn't count. It's not really all that fair to them if you don't attack during training. Doesn't reflect reality. He's not wrong, Hakai pointed out, surprisingly agreeing with her brother. For once she added as an afterthought, which made more sense. "Hey!" Kij protested indignantly. "Say, would you like to participate, Kij?" IG asked then, receding his control the smallest bit. "What kind of question is that?" he replied, instantly grasping at the opening and taking over. All of IG's friends seemed surprised with the sudden change in style, but they recovered quickly. Not that it meant much, if anything it just made things worse, since Kij was much less inclined to give them mercy or go easy on them. Soon, they were being smacked around like they owed him money. "That was mean," Hakai pointed out, not sounding amused. "He wasn't wrong, I was going easy on them and that's not really gonna help much," IG defended himself. "It was just difficult to actually go as hard on them as he'd need to. He didn't want to do that, even if he knew it was necessary. I meant giving him control instead of me," Hakai clarified then. Next time," he offered awkwardly, earning himself a huff from the obviously annoyed woman. "You better," the woman told him, and he almost could imagine her eyes narrowing before she sighed and continued. "Well, guess I'm the only one keeping an eye on Hinata and Hanabi," she added then. "The little one is doing really well, by the way. She must have been working on that a lot since you left." "That's good. Web sense would be useless for her, but maybe I'll teach it to her anyway, just in case. And also, maybe chakra flow through the wires." He mused, brainstorming ideas more than actually suggesting anything. "That might be a little much, don't you think?" she questioned, unsure, before making a suggestion of her own. "Maybe one of your latest creations. Last embrace should be useful. Now there's an idea. Anything for Hinata. Well, if she wants to use the wires in conjunction with her medical training, then I think you can easily make something that she can use for that," don't you think? She replied easily enough. Sure enough, an idea did pop in his mind. Maybe he could even use that to fight, even if it'd be a little gruesome. Something to work on, yeah, he said then, just as Kij smacked Shikamaru and basically ended the fight. How is it that you get more and more ridiculous every time? Kiba grumbled before groaning and slumping down on the ground. Apparently, he was a little too exhausted / bruised to stand up. IG was sure that Kij was preening proudly somewhere in the mindscape now that he was back in control. He is. It's rather pathetic, really, Hakai confirmed and commented, earning a protest from her brother. Sachigumo, meanwhile, was laughing because of reasons, he supposed. He wasn't too sure. It could be because of his friends getting smacked. She always had fun when he sparred against people. Or maybe it was because of her siblings. Or maybe both, he guessed. So, our turn, huh? Sakura asked then, sounding almost amused as she approached the groaning boys. Hinata stopped her own exercises and walked closer too, as Karen did the same from the house. Those three were the medics, after all, and they very much wanted to practice too. IG had a feeling that they'd get very good after some time to help after spars. Ino meanwhile, poked Shikamaru with a stick with an amused expression. God, my friends are weird. You're one to talk. Oh. I think I've been made to wait long enough, IG Sasori said one day, after he finally finished making his body forward / puppet. It was strange, looking at him standing there looking like he was about the same age as IG himself. Then again, he looked quite more puppet-like than he had with his previous one. It either wasn't completely finished or there was something he couldn't make without his forward / some other body. I'm surprised you even did at all, the team leader replied with a slight smile. I guess you decided that getting your body was a good enough priority in the meantime. Indeed. The ex-Akatsuki member replied stoically as always. So, what do you want to start with? IG asked, sitting against a tree and overlooking the team training. Initially, he'd wanted to separate his suicide squad from his group of friends forward / siblings. However, some talks here and there with the Hokage and the other team's parents had assuaged his worries. Now, there they were, Tumrai, Teiya, Shikamaru and Shino plotting stuff that would probably give most people nightmares. Jirobo, Chaoji, Kiba and Sajuk trading blows. Kabuto, Hinata, Sakura and Karen were probably talking about medical stuff by themselves off to the side. Meanwhile, Naruto and Yujito were quite a bit more separated than the rest, and IG didn't need to be psychic to know what that was about. Ino, for her part, seemed to hop between groups, except for the Jinchurikis one, since they had asked for privacy. Poor Hanabi would have been a little left out if she wasn't busy with classes at the moment. Overall, the two groups seemed to bond well enough. Although IG suspected that his team was merely humoring the others out of respect forward / fear of him. If that was the case then, well, he couldn't precisely force them to like his group of friends, really. What was that technique? Sasori asked, bringing him out of his observations. I believe that's one question I've already answered, IG replied with a half smile. That could be interpreted in a number of ways, Sasori reasoned flatly. A more detailed explanation would be appreciated. I guess it can, can't it? He admitted as he pondered what the best way to answer that was. The void is what I think waits for all of us after we die. That's all there is in the afterlife, in my opinion. Absolutely nothing. Silence fell between them after his words. IG was a little surprised by it, but not overly so. He simply waited for another question to come. Surely Sasori had a bunch of those. Maybe he was just sorting through them. Do you have an opinion on art? He asked then, catching the boy completely off guard. Seriously? That's the second question. IG asked himself incredulously. Then again, much of Deidara's and Sasori's characters were based around their definition of art. In the latter's case, puppets that symbolized eternity. Or something along those lines, at least. He didn't have that too clear, if he was honest. Not a strong one, no, IG admitted in the end, considering the question for a moment as it was the other's time to wait. If I had to describe what art is for me though, I guess it would have to be something meaningful, he explained then. One can paint a beautiful sight, play a wonderful melody or tell an amazing story, but, in the end, if it means nothing, I don't think it is art. It should mean something, if not for the public, for the creator. Especially for the creator. Why so? Sasori prodded, and if IG didn't know better, he'd thought he sounded eager. I'm no artist, I don't think, he replied, not really answering as he pulled a notebook from a scroll that he took out of his pouch. Opening it, he started going through drawings he'd made. But I still consider these to be art, he said, showing the Exakatsuki-some. A few had sights of Konoha, most, however, depicted his family, his friends and his team. Because it means something. I care about this, and because of that, when I see them, I can think of them as art. I see. Sasori said then, slowly, considering. What is your goal, IG Sata? He asked, although his eyes seemed to be still trained on the pages of the notebook. Silently, the boy passed the item to him so that he could see however much he wanted. There wasn't anything in there that really meant anything or that could be dangerous for him to see. That much he knew, and Kij and Hakai confirmed for him. My goal? To achieve peace, so that what I care about can be safe, he replied, much more confident with this question. Get strong enough that nobody will even think about going to war. I'll be their deterrent and their motivation, if I need to be. Peaceful times to enjoy my life, that's my ultimate goal, you could say. That's a rather simple objective, I would say. A difficult one, but still simple, the Exakatsuki commented. And I'm guessing I'll be part of this process now, then he stated, more than asked. You'll help me deal with Akatsuki. After that? I guess it'll depend, IG replied. Oh. It'll depend on how helpful you are, I guess, IG clarified. And how much humanity remains in you too, he added in his mind. Your situation is quite different from the rest of the team, I'm sure you realize. He could probably talk his way into making his team not be considered criminals at some point, especially if they helped against Akatsuki. Sasori was another thing entirely. As it was, he risked Suna reacting badly to his inclusion, even with Akatsuki looming over the nations. Without that threat, there was no way they'd let the man live at all. Then again, Gaara was Kazekage, and if IG could get some of the other nations on board. Something to think about. So, it's either working under you or dying, Sasori reasoned, as if he were talking about a game of shogi and not his life. Then again, IG wondered if he would even be able to show emotions at all if he had them. I guess I have some thinking to do. You could say that, IG replied wryly. Oh. You've grown a lot, Brat Anko said as they sat on a tree near the middle of the forest of death. Each was on a branch, resting their backs against the trunk, Anko eating and him drawing. It was peaceful, which made him smirk the smallest bit. He was sure there weren't many that would think that regarding that training ground. I mean, yeah, it's been like a year since we met, right? More or less. IG asked, blinking as he realized he was about right. It's been that long. Well. Time passes. Shocking, I know, Kij said in his mind, clearly amused. You know that's not what I meant, Anko replied, and he remained silent then. When I was told to teach you, I knew you would grow a lot. To get that kind of privilege and that kind of attention, you had to be that kind of person. Even then, I wasn't ready for what you'd become, IG. The boy himself kept his mouth shut then, taking in her words. Look at us now, Anko continued. You are Jounin and I'm still at a Kubetsu Jounin. You could kick my ass without even having to go all out. Probably without even using half your tricks and techniques. He didn't correct her. IG probably wouldn't even need to use more than a handful of techniques, if that. It was sad, in a way. Anko had been his teacher for so long, it was difficult to see her as just a beatable person. That image felt all sorts of wrong. What I'm trying to get at is. She kept on going, before the words seemed to get stuck in her throat. He stopped faking to draw and stored his notebook and pencil inside a scroll before turning towards her. She was sitting sideways already, apparently having turned towards him too. The look in her eyes was one that he'd never seen on her, if he was honest. I'm proud of you, IG, and I'm proud of having been your teacher, she finally managed. He gave her a small smile. Anko sounded so terribly awkward saying that. The words felt strange to even hear, like she wasn't supposed to say that. It wasn't in her character to say something like that at all. The fact that she did at all spoke more than the words themselves, actually. I'm proud of having been your student, he replied, his smile widening. Oh God, this is awful, let's do something else. He couldn't help but laugh out loud at that. Now that was more like the Anko he knew. He definitely preferred things like that, honestly. However, her next words made him narrow his eyes. What do you say, brat? Snakes vs spiders. We'll win, of course, but we can fake that intrigue. She didn't just say that, IG thought to himself. She certainly did, Kij commented, sounding positively amused. We are going to kick your old slithery asses, you can bet on that. You didn't just call me that, Anko hissed, eyes narrowed. He certainly did, Kij said in his mind, as if the woman could hear him. Already losing your hearing, huh? Understandable. Brat, I so want to smack you right now. You sure that won't hurt you more than me? Overall, meeting with his sensei was great. Oh. I didn't expect that to happen, IG mumbled, earning himself agreeing hums from Kij and Hakai and barks from Sachigumo and Yuki. And a whole lot of other dogs around, since they were at the vet. Welp, is my food as good as you remember, guys, or is it better? He asked then, turning towards the puppies that surrounded him. They replied very enthusiastically, but IG couldn't know which answer they were actually giving. It wasn't too important though, he was just enjoying doing this after so long. How long has it actually been? He wondered to himself as he petted Yuki with one hand and a puppy with the other. A while, Hakai commented. Entirely too long, considering how much it helps you relax, she added then, ever the thoughtful one. Indeed, Kij agreed, although IG noticed something weird in his tone. He likes the vet, it seems, Hakai explained, immediately ratting her brother out. So does Sachigumo, she continued, getting an easy agreement from the chakra beast, contrary to the sputtering denials of Kij. Well, get used to it, IG replied with a smile. We are gonna come here a lot. I've missed this. Good Kij said, which almost made IG laugh out loud. It wasn't helped by the sight before him, really, which had prompted the whole line of thought. Kabuto and Hana trading notes on how to treat Ninken. Apparently, while his teammate was confident enough in his ability to treat Yuki, he wanted to be better. And who better to teach him a thing or two than the person in charge of treating the Inuzuka's partners? They'd been talking for most of the visit and IG was sure this would be a common occurrence if they came again. Which they totally would, of course. Not only did IG want to see his canine friends again, but Kabuto himself seemed keen on the idea. So, with a partner in crime, he would definitely visit more. And that wasn't even counting Kij and his weak spot for the puppies. I don't have a soft spot for them. The aforementioned protested. You certainly do, Hakai pipped, sounding supremely amused. Don't worry, Kij IG reassured with a grin. Nobody's gonna mock you for that. Speak for yourself, Hakai said then. Oh, my bad, the boy replied. Well, too bad for you, Kij, he added solemnly. I hate all of you. Sachigumo barked something that IG knew meant no, you don't. That got a laugh out of Hakai, while IG himself had to do his best to keep his amusement to himself. No need to look like a weirdo. At least until a puppy jumped on him and started licking his face. No need to hide laughter after that. It also reminded him that he had a whole bunch of canines ready to play with and, really, who was he to deny them? Oh. IG laid on the ground in a training ground by himself. He'd come to train a little, harder than usual, which meant that he was a danger to anyone around. Not even his own team could be around in case something went out of control. Considering the level of destruction he'd unleashed, he'd made the right decision. It also let him have all the time in the world to check his screens without drawing attention to himself. Like he was doing at that very moment, since, for once, his training had been eventful system-wise. After all, as time passed, his stats and skills grew harder and harder to level up. It was the late game for him, it seemed. He wouldn't be surprised if he got more stat levels through quests than through training, even taking into account how rare the former were. Back to the subject at hand though. Dexterity has gone up a level. New perk acquired, Devour Hope. Level 60 ha. Just like it had been level 30 before. I had almost forgotten about that, he mused as he eyed the screen before calling for the perks. Devour Hope. The user's dexterity is increased by 5% with every opponent defeated. Max of 50%. Resets every day, clones do not count for the effect. IG considered that for a long moment. Do you think Pain's paths count? He asked then, as the idea popped in his mind. Don't see why not, Kij replied, and the boy could almost see him shrugging. It only clarifies for clones, which they are not. Should be useful then. It could have been better though, Hakai commented, and IG could only agree. It sounded like a neat perk, don't get him wrong, but it'd help little against Akatsuki, from what he knew of them. It's better than nothing, he decided with a weary expression before calling for some more screens. IG Sata. Main title, Anko Mitarashi's Apprentice. Secondary title, Prodigy. Energy points, 1140/1140. Chakra points, 1450/1450. Natural energy points, 0/1450. Beast chakra points, 0/0. Strength, 57. Dexterity, 60. Constitution, 57. Chakra, 57. Chakra control, God, now I remember why I don't check this nearly as often. They take forever for a single level, he grumbled to himself before sighing. With a wave of his hand, all the screens disappeared except for one. His true ace up his sleeve. Slow progress, Hakai said, as if predicting Ige's thoughts. It'll get there, don't worry, she added reassuringly. I know, he replied with a sigh. Up for some more training, Sachigumo. The energetic bark she gave in response almost returned some of his own energy. Lightning release, relentless storm LVL8. Oh. It was late at night, about a week since he'd arrived back at Konoha. Ige had been staying up late like usual, although it was more because he was waiting than because he had things to work through. He did, but the addition of shadow clones had made training and jutsu creation so much easier that he found himself with some free time. And considering what awaited him, he thought it would be better to use his downtime to relax and distract himself a little. Hey there, Ige asked casually when an Anbu-clad ninja appeared in front of him. How's it going? He added then, a lazy smirk on his face. He could hear his mind's inhabitants chuckling, but he ignored them except for a small wave of praise at Sachigumo. Without her, there was no way that he'd been able to maintain eternal purge for too long. Rather well, I would say, the ninja replied, as if the situation were completely normal. Even going as far as taking one of the chairs, pulling it back and taking a seat. What the Ige thought, eyes widening when the Anbu ninja was replaced by Danza himself in the blink of an eye, as if it had always been him. Show off, he added with a slight smirk. Especially after you've basically countered all the enmity that Iwa held for us due to the fourth. That's good to know, I guess, Ige said then, tilting his head to the side. But I'm sure you aren't here for a social visit, are you? He better not be. Ige didn't know how he would take it otherwise. Indeed, I'm not, he said then. I'm here to issue a mission of sorts. That gave Ige pause. What could he possibly want him to do? Surely he was doing enough for the village just by taking down this worldwide threat, right? He certainly felt like it was all he could do not to fail at it. What more could Danza possibly want? Here, just give it a read, the man told him simply, placing a file on the table and pushing it towards Ige. Hesitantly, the boy took it, his eyes almost refusing to leave the route leader. Eventually, he turned to do as he was told. He could give the man that much, he mused. After all the help he'd received when he most needed it, that was something he could afford to do, at the least. Ige ended up being glad he did. As he read through the pages of information, he grew more and more concerned. I thought this was Fanon, he thought to himself, feeling his eyebrows draw together into an angry frown. It's on that side of your information, yes, Hakai confirmed grimly. This is because of the changes, Ige realized then, as he continued reading. So, I take it you are interested? Danza asked with a smirk. He had good reason to be smug though, considering that they both knew Ige would take this mission. Didn't make the boy be less annoyed though. Yeah. I'll do it, he muttered, narrowing his eyes down at the file before looking at the war orc. The Seven Tails Jinchuriki won't stay at Takegakyo. I still can't believe you won't celebrate your promotion, Naruto grumbled, and Ige deflated and rolled his eyes at him. Seriously, the blonde just wouldn't leave that alone. Yes, he was a Jounin now, officially since he came back to Konoha, really, but he didn't feel any different. One would think that becoming a Jounin would change something, right? Didn't feel that way at all for IG though. The only thing it seemed to add to him was a title, really. Jounin of Konoha. Increases stats when taking part on a Konoha-sanctioned mission by 30%. Increases skill efficiency when taking part on a Konoha-sanctioned mission by 15%. It wasn't a bad title, really, but IG was pretty sure he still preferred to have Weaver and Wielder of New Ivory. After all, those had pretty much the same effect so long as he had New Ivory with him, with Weaver having some other bonuses added to that. Only thing Jounin of Konoha had going for it was the skill efficiency part, but it wasn't enough, really. Besides, he wasn't too sure about the sanctioned mission requirement, really. What if it didn't work at some point because something wasn't actually mission required? Yeah, IG much preferred to have something that would work all the time. It was underwhelming, honestly. What else was there to celebrate about? Being a Jounin gave him access to knowledge on almost any jutsu he could want, but he was a little past that part. If he wanted a technique, chances were that he could just make one and it would be tailored to his style instead of something more generic. Authority. Please, IG didn't have more of that than he had before. Only thing that changed on that front was that he now could be put in positions of power over people. However, out of missions, he didn't have much more authority than anyone else. People would listen if a Jounin told them something, for sure, but abusing that was a quick way to get thrown back to Chunin, or even Genin. Besides, he didn't want authority in the first place, really. He had access to missions with higher pay, yeah, but those usually came with increased risk. There were more than a few missions that IG wouldn't have much trouble with, but he couldn't even go on those, since he was apparently stuck dealing with Akatsuki while the world struggled not to fall apart around him. Fun stuff, he thought wryly. Naruto, will you leave it alone? Sasuke grumbled from where he sat opposite to the blonde. The Uchiha, much like he'd started doing before they were even out of the academy, had joined them for most meals. He'd never accepted their offer to just stay with them in the extra room they had never actually filled with anything, but it was what it was. Turned out to be a sort of good thing, since their place now housed Karen too. Then again, with just the money IG had been given for the I-1 mission alone, they would have been able to get a bigger place. Funny that, since nobody had told him about that part. Probably foreseen that he didn't much care about it, really. It had been a nice bonus though. Speaking of Karen, she was currently looking between the three of them. Poor girl was still getting used to the group's antics, it seemed, which told IG that she hadn't been around for very long. He didn't have a single clue how that had come to be either, which just confused him more. What change had led to that? Or was it just an entirely or thing? Both. But Sasuke. He's a Jounin now. Naruto whined, as if he couldn't understand why nobody was making a big deal out of it but him. The rest of the group were like that probably because they had grown up in families that had more Jounin members than not. Hell, Sasuke's brother had become Anbu at a younger age than IG had made Jounin. It was your dream before, why aren't you more excited? That got the whole table to blink, before both Sasuke and Karen turned towards IG. Ha! The boy in question said intelligently. Then, a memory almost forgotten resurfaced. Ha, so it was he heard Hakai mumble. Just Jounin, really? Kij said, both amused and bemused by that tidbit. Hey, I was a kid. He joked, earning a snort from both of his mindscape occupants. I'd forgotten about that, IG replied out loud. I remember someone saying that it was lame though. Hey, Well, Naruto stammered then, chuckling weakly as he started scratching the back of his head. But it was still your dream though. He defended himself. Anyway, it's been forever since then. My goal has changed quite a bit. Jounin isn't all that, really, IG said then with a shrug. Just Jounin, really? Sasuke asked, incredulous. That's what I said. Kij exclaimed, with a laugh. What? I was a normal kid before I met this idiot, IG replied, almost letting out a laugh himself. He'd never been normal really, after all. It's all his fault. I know. I'm awesome, that way Naruto boasted, clearly proud of having turned IG away from a path of normality. As if you'd have ever been normal, IG Hakai told him, with no mercy whatsoever. So, about that party. No, IG denied instantly. But IG threw too. The blonde then proceeded to whine, making him roll his eyes. I think I'll just go wash the dishes, yeah, Karen said shyly, starting to gather the table. You aren't gonna be able to escape this madness, just saying, Sasuke told the girl, with a wry smile. Believe me, I've tried. Way to crush her hopes, Sasuke IG commented. I wasn't trying to. Normal people are boring anyway, Naruto protested, crossing his arms. I didn't say anything about that though, Karen said weakly. I just thought I'd wash the dishes while you talked, she added, earning a raised eyebrow from all three of them. Sure you did, Karen, sure you did. Oh. Is this what being Teiya feels like? Because it sucks, Tamrai grumbled from where she sat in a small circle with Kabuto, Jirobo, Yujito and Sasori. This is an interesting game, the puppet master commented as he put down a card. Which was all sorts of surprising on its own, never mind the fact that he was playing at all. Mostly because he'd spoken, since Sasori usually stayed silent, even when doing something with the team. Oh come on. Teiya, can you come and play too? Take the bad luck away from me, please. Tamrai all but cried out. Fuck you, bimbo number one, the redhead said as she glared at the blonde, flute still in place as she played her music. She was using that trick more and more, IG had noticed. He wasn't one to complain though, if he could hear her music all day, he would. Oh. It had been a while since IG had stopped doing kata training. Anko's style of teaching involved a lot more sparring than just going through motions, and he'd taken that approach when training with his team too. Thus, as he slowly went through each stance, transitioning from one to the other as carefully as possible, he couldn't help but find it interesting. Subtle fist taijutsu has gone up a level. It was good that he'd long since gotten used to the screens. He couldn't imagine Hayashi would take kindly to his concentration being broken out of nowhere for seemingly no reason. Still, it was good that he could all but follow the katas in his sleep by that point, because he couldn't help but mentally call for the skill screen. Subtle Fist Taijutsu LVL7 increases the skill of the user in hand-to-hand combat targeting weak spots in the human body. We're getting there, IG mused to himself as he continued through the exercise with Hayashi by his side, watching like a hawk. The man took teaching very seriously, he'd found. Which was great, actually. IG was already coming up with ways to use this knowledge to his advantage. Between what Hayashi was teaching him and his medical knowledge, the boy was sure he could create something interesting. Maybe involving threads, he thought, idly using living thread to move the wires he carried around for no apparent reason. Honestly, after so long using them, they felt almost like an extension of his body. New ivory could be used for that too, I guess, he continued theorizing. You are doing remarkably well, he heard Hayashi comment, but IG didn't so much as twitch at the sound of the man's voice. He'd made that mistake once and not again. Thanks, I guess, the boy replied without stopping. The existence of the subtle fist had been a surprise, really. As Hayashi told him when they'd started, the style was used by Hyuga members that had lost their eyes one way or another. It made sense then, even if it was a little disturbing, that many members had lost their sight at some point in their career. Any enemy would try to take the sight away from a Hyuga, which meant that some had to have managed to succeed. The clan's answer to this was the subtle fist, a style that used their extensive knowledge of the human body to target weak spots just like the gentle fist targeted Tenketsu. Apparently, it was the closest thing to the gentle fist the Hyuga clan could teach to anyone that didn't actually have the Bakugan. IG wasn't complaining though. It was an honor to be given the opportunity, considering that according to Hayashi, nobody else had been taught the style. There were similar stylists throughout the world, of course, but the one from the Hyuga clan wasn't found outside of it, until IG, that is. And that wasn't even mentioning the fact that subtle fist was supposed to use the same chakra attacks that the gentle fist did, which was unique to it as far as Hayashi was concerned at least. IG was sure that meant that he'd get to that once he finished leveling up the basic skill or something of the sort. Furthermore, there was also something else that he'd been told he would be taught. However, he wasn't getting his hopes up for that. Hayashi had told him that he'd need to lay down more groundwork for that. IG didn't know if that meant regarding his training or the man's takeover of the clan leadership. He would possibly have to wait until the man truly started reforming the clan, which would take a while. That was time he probably didn't have, but it was nice to know, he guessed. Okay, that's enough, Hayashi announced then, making IG finally relax. The boy then took a deep breath in and let it out as he let his exhausted limbs rest, moving to sit on the ground. On the other side of the training area, Hinata and Hanabi were doing much worse, all but having dropped to the ground as the announcement was made. They had been going through subtle fist katas along with him, all the while using living thread and web sense. Hayashi had been quite keen on having that latter one taught to his daughters when IG had mentioned wanting to teach them something else. Apparently, he'd been wrong to assume that they wouldn't be interested in it. The clan head had admitted that it was mainly so that they would have something they could use to see everything without having to use the Bakugan. Once he was told the man's take on that, IG immediately understood. The Bakugan wasn't a subtle technique, after all. The signs that the bloodline limit was used were very clear to anyone. Living thread had no such tell though, unless the wires in question were used blatantly. Thus, it allowed the use of the subtle fist instead of the gentle fist in certain situations. After all, while Hyuga features were very obvious, nobody would expect a Hyuga to fight without their bloodline limit. It certainly gave the girls something to work with if the situation allowed it, and Hayashi was all too eager to add stuff to their arsenal. Call the man whatever you wanted, but he certainly seemed to care, even if he went about it in some very wrong ways, from what IG had seen in the past. With less pressure from his clan, Hayashi almost seemed to be a completely different person, which was a relief. Don't move the wires so quickly, IG told the girls then, his own exhaustion bleeding into his tone. You are doing well keeping them as out of sight as possible, but if you move them too quickly, they can catch someone's attention. Yes, IG Hinata nodded, from where she struggled to stay in a sitting position on the ground. Yes, IG-sensei was Hanabi's response, coming at the same time as her sisters. That made the girl blush profusely while both her father and IG himself turned to look at her with a raised eyebrow. When Hayashi spoke though, it was to say something that didn't reassure him at all. Now there's an idea. Oh. Ig leaned against the front door of the vet and stared. Then, he looked down at Yuki, who was standing next to him, at the same time that the Ninken turned towards him. Around them, a bunch of dogs and puppies ran and barked, fortunately not enough to cause too much of a ruckus. Is this going to become a thing? Ig wondered out loud, earning a single, united bark from all the canines in the vet and Yuki. He sighed. I was afraid you'd say that. He turned his eyes back to what he'd been staring at, which is to say Kabuto and Hana, who were trading notes on treatments and whatnot. The Inuzuka was currently sitting behind the front desk, while the Yakushi leaned forward in front of her, both of them looking over some notes laid on the counter. They'd been like that practically since they had arrived, which was, at the least an hour prior. Well, a man's gotta do what a man's gotta do, Ig mumbled to himself, earning snort from Yuki. Hey, Kabuto. He called, snapping the two of them out of their conversation. We have training to do, you know. But no worries, if you wanna stay, I can just go. I'm sure the others will understand if you want to have some time with your girlfriend. Ig. The girlfriend in question protested, glaring at him as she turned bright red. Hey, I was just offering to help, he replied innocently. Let's just go, Kabuto mumbled as he walked up to Ig, his expression blank. Amusingly enough, he thought he saw the ex-spy's mask crack a bit. Either it really affected him or he's not as committed to that act, he noted, pleased with either development. The man seemed to be much more of a person as time passed. Sorry to interrupt, man, Ig told his team member. But really, you should ask her out, I'm sure there's better date spots than her workplace. Ig. Hana repeated, louder this time, but her voice was muffled as the vet's door closed behind them. Yuki simply barked a laugh at that. I hate you, Ig, Kabuto grumbled. I know. Oh. What are you going to do, Temurai? Ig asked, sitting with his back against a tree. The rest of the team had been sent away, probably with Anbu /root stalking them all the way. Hiruzen hadn't been too clear on how things went on that front, which was enough to tell Ig that the old man didn't trust them nearly as much as the boy himself did. Annoying for his team, but understandable. I don't know the Sunaku no Ichi replied, which was a bit of a problem. He'd been all too willing to wait, but time passed and she still wouldn't give him an answer. He needed to know who would be there during the next mission, he needed to know what he could count with and what not. He had plans for both situations, but clearing that up could only help focus his efforts, really. Have you talked with your brother? We've traded a few letters, she admitted, visibly trying to gather her thoughts. He has told me how things are going back home. He says things are going well. Your Hokage seems to be helping him understand what he needs to do and such. We both know that they are shaping Gaara to favor Konoha though. It's not a bad thing, I'd say, and that's not because I'm a Konoha nin, Ig commented. I know that. Temurai said. It's probably the best way to get Suna out of its situation. You want to help him too? Ig guessed, more than able to relate to that. He'd have wanted to be with Naruto too, if he was going through that. At the same time, I want to take Akatsuki out, let my brother not have to worry about them, Temurai mumbled, her hands balling into fists. But they could go after him and I'd be somewhere else. I don't know what to do. From what I know, there's nothing that would suggest Akatsuki is going after your brother anytime soon, Ig commented. He'd talked about that with Danza. The route leader had replied to that question with a summary of what they knew about Akatsuki movements so far. There were the Takegakyo reports, which were the most clear sightings. There were some others though, like a few that circled around Kirigakyo, but nothing anywhere close to the land of wind. That's good to know, she replied, before looking at him strangely. Gaara didn't say anything about that. They might have not told him. Akatsuki information isn't spread around unless it's needed to know. So, keep that to yourself, yeah? He asked, receiving a slow nod from her. Do you think we can stop them before they reach my brother? He remained silent after that question, wondering about that himself. I think it's possible, he answered, not really promising anything, and he knew Tamrai would pick up on that. Indeed, a second later she sighed. Let's try then, she said then, a grim smile on her face. Gaara will be all right, he told her, closing his eyes as plans formed in his head. Danza, the Spider Clan, maybe even the Snake Clan. Yes, he could pull some strings to make that happen. It was no guarantee, but he could stack things in their favor a little and hope it was enough. I'll do my best to keep him safe. Would be a lousy friend if I didn't, right? Maybe we can visit sooner once we are done with these missions. Thank you. Don't mention it. Oh. Didn't think I'd have you working here again. I mean, I thought, why not? Ig mused as he settled a potted plant on a shelf. It sounded like a good idea. For old time's sake and all that. We certainly appreciate the help, Ig Noriko told him with a smile. If only so that I don't have to hear Ino say how bored she is every 5 minutes. What? This is boring, said girl protested from behind the counter. Besides, I haven't been complaining nearly as much as before. Which isn't saying much, really, Noriko shot back with a smile that didn't match her words at all. Ino just groaned while Ig chuckled as he continued helping out. Oh. As if your stupid wires weren't annoying enough already, fearless leader Teiya grumbled as threads wrapped around Jirobo, firmly holding him in place despite the genjutsu user's boost together with Kabuto's. The big guy couldn't so much as twitch, under the grasp of one of his new wire-based techniques. Last Embrace LVL 15. C-rank technique with which the user wraps a target with threads and holds them in place. Hand seals 3. Consumption 10 chakra points every second. Plus creator bonus. Increases hold strength by 50%. Use more thread techniques, she says. Ig mocked, almost laughing when he heard several curses. His hands then blurred into hand seals. Fuck. He heard, and, surprisingly, it didn't come from Teiya but from Tamrai. Which was an appropriate reaction, maybe, since the wires all around came alive and started rushing at them like whips. Ig repeated the hand seals again and again, his threads hitting again and again, with his team barely managing to dodge. Even with the delay of having to use hand seals, it was a troublesome technique to go against, as his team attested to. And even if being hit by the wires wasn't dangerous, dodging by itself was hard, since Ig liberally used living thread to mess with their evasion routes. It was a fun exercise, really. For Ig, that is. For his team. Well, maybe. Whiplash LVL 17. C-rank technique with which the user lashes at targets using threads. Hand seals 3. Range 34 meters. Consumption 6 chakra points. Plus creator bonus. Increases range by 25%. Increases strength by 25%. Fearless leader Taeya all but growled. I hate you. I'm hurt, truly, he replied, placing a hand over his chest. Yujito seemed to think that was her chance, silly woman. She ran face first into a web made out of wire that had been previously almost invisible. Something that was immediately followed by a shock of stunning thread. Noxious Trap LVL5. C-rank technique with which the user can hide threads from sight. Hand seals 15. Consumption 30 chakra points. Plus creator bonus. Increases hiding efficacy by 25%. Increases wire strength by 25%. Man, using only wire is fun, IG mused out loud with a grin. Right. An excited Shirakumo exclaimed from his shoulder, at the same time as Sachigumo barked excitedly inside his mind. It seemed that he wasn't the only one enjoying himself. The same couldn't be said about his team, but, well, training wasn't supposed to be fun, right? He chuckled. You are evil, Boss Gyrobo commented with a grimace as he continued struggling against the wires around him. I know. But it's a lot of fun, IG replied unrepentantly. Oh. Thanks for the help, Chaoji, IG said with a smile as he washed the dishes. It had been yet another day when the whole group and his team gathered for a meal, and that always meant a whole lot of cooking and cleaning. Having someone lend a hand was nice, especially someone that knew what they were doing. I'm helping too, fearless leader, but I can go away if that's not the case, Taeya grumbled as she set a dry dish down. You know what I meant, Taeya, he said, rolling his eyes. Having some help when cooking is always appreciated. Well, it's not my fault you are so good. Everyone's afraid of messing up, the genjutsu user spat then, making him blink. That's a thing? He asked, turning to his Akimichi friend, who was looking at him with an uncomfortable smile. Is that why nobody helps? I mean, maybe. Man, you guys suck, IG grumbled then. I'm gonna start making worse food, maybe then I won't have to do it all on my own, at least. Don't you dare, Taeya growled, pointing at him with a now clean knife. What are you gonna do? Put a genjutsu on me? He asked then, with a grin. I think you might cause a riot if you do that, IG Chaoji commented with a nervous chuckle. I mean, they might turn to you for food, the satyr pointed out, making the Akimichi pale and start sweating. You wouldn't do that, right? The boy asked, receiving only silence for an answer. Right. I'm gonna find a way through your dispelling technique, I swear, Taeya hissed, angrily turning to continue helping Chaoji dry what he washed. If not, I'll just have to find another way to kick your ass. You can try, IG shot back. I'm suddenly feeling like a third wheel, Chaoji mumbled, making both IG and Taeya turn to stare at him, then at each other and then back at the Akimichi. They ended that with an unimpressed raised eyebrow. I'll just, go with the others, wanted to talk with Shika about something and, yeah. And with that, the boy ran away. Man, your friends really are afraid of you, huh? Taeya commented and he just turned to give her a smirk. Just like my team, he pointed out, earning a grimace from the girl, who didn't even try to correct him. I'm still waiting, old man, IG said, standing straight. Currently, he was in front of not only the Hokage, but also the man's apparent successor, Tsunade, and the leader of Root, Danza. One wouldn't have guessed so though, with how calm he sounded, all but demanding an answer to his request. It's not an easy thing, what you are asking, IG, the old man replied, taking a drag from his pipe. And what you are asking of me is? The boy shot back, making the Hokage grimace. I don't care about being sent on these missions, old man, I really don't. These people are hunting down Naruto and Gaara. I will hunt them down, happily at that. But the least you can do is give me this for the trouble though. Hiruzen sighed then, massaging his forehead as he considered those words. The people on both sides of him remained silent, although Ig could see that Tsunade was annoyed. He didn't know if that was directed at his request, or something else, but she didn't voice any complaints so far, so he took that as a win. Danza, for his part, didn't so much as twitch, looking impassively towards Ig in a way that frankly unnerved the boy a little. Sasori is out of the question. Old man, I told you that when I asked, Ig replied, unimpressed, drawing a grimace of a smile from the man. Had he expected that saying that would make him change his mind or reconsider or something? Will you give me my team or do I have to be drastic? Threatening the Hokage. Ig could safely say that he'd never have thought he could get away with that. Especially not so early in his career. As things stood though, he was the most promising ninja in the village. Not the strongest, he didn't think, not even close. However, he was the one that seemed to be able to go the furthest. He was young, he was still growing by leaps and bounds, and he didn't seem likely to go rogue anytime soon, if they played their cards right. Thus, that made him important enough to not want to antagonize. With a name behind him, he'd have likely been able to get away with just about anything. Hell, they probably wouldn't send him in the missions they did if he did come from an important family. With all those factors, he had the makings of a high-placed council member, if not Hokage. He still could make the second one, as demonstrated by Minato Namikaze. It was also possible that the only reason they were sending him on these missions was because they knew he wanted to go, and they were letting him, because it was also convenient. Ig was sure that was how the village saw him, at least. Or somewhere along those lines. Regardless, between that and the fact that he was already quite close with Hiruzen after years of interactions, he thought he could get away with this much. Danza had practically groomed him to be like this too, to do what he thought was necessary, so he couldn't really complain. And as for Tsunade, well, she better get used to him, because he wasn't changing, even if she was made Hokage. We'll do it, Hiruzen acknowledged in the end, and Ig nodded, giving the old man a smile. I wanted to talk to you too, Brat, Tsunade voiced then, drawing the attention of the other two. First of all, I really hope you know what you are doing with Sasori. But after Orochimaru, I think I can give you the benefit of the doubt. Thank you for your generosity, Ig said blandly, not really sure how to respond in any other way. Second, and most important, the woman continued, ignoring his words altogether. You do know what that technique you made with what I taught you does, don't you? Ig tensed then. His body coiled like a spring, even if it was barely noticeable. He almost wanted to disappear from the room. He couldn't very well do that though, could he? Instead, he gave her a forced smile. I do. So I see, she commented, clearly having seen his reaction, same as the other two. He hadn't even bothered hoping that he would get away with that. It was a lost battle from the beginning. And you won't stop using it. I won't, Ig admitted. Sachigumo is helping me deal with that though, don't worry, he said, waving the whole thing away. None of the three believed him, which was fair. He was all but lying to their faces, after all, and everyone knew it. So you say? Tsunade nodded slowly, drawing an angry bout of barking from the chakra beast inside him. Sachigumo took offense to that, evidently. You are not dumb, kid, she said, which probably could be classified as quite the compliment, coming from her. Don't do dumb shit. Thanks for the vote of confidence, he replied, trying to put as convincing a smile as he could manage at the moment. I mean it, she all but growled, and his smile turned sad. I know what I'm doing, he told her. And he wasn't lying about that, but he wasn't being entirely truthful. It was what it was, though. There was little else he could do about the subject matter, after all. Evidently, she was good enough to realize what he was saying and what he was not saying, because he saw her eyebrow twitch and her expression turn even more angry. Try and get some interesting missions sent Naruto's way, yeah, old man? IG asked then, changing the topic with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. And Kiba and Sasuke too, for that matter. They are bored out of their minds, staying inside the village. I'll see what I can do, Hiruzen replied with a tired smile. Giving a nod to the three of them, IG left. Danza might not have said anything, but Sato almost felt like that was worse. It meant that he agreed with what he was doing, after all. IG might have worked with the guy for a while and he might think he was affected by the or/butterfly effects, yes. However, it still left a bad taste in his mouth, that he had such a man basically backing him up on his decisions. It was what it was, though. Oh. IG sat on the ground, hearing nothing but music, feeling nothing but the wind, smelling nothing but the forest, seeing nothing but the drawing on his notebook, tasting nothing but the sweet dango. Honestly, it was one of the most peaceful moments he'd gone through as of late, which was saying something, considering that he'd been back home for a while now. Regardless, there was nothing for him to do in the immediate future. The scenery was great and he'd gotten his team's situation mostly resolved. It was a shame that one of those was fake. He was curious, so very curious, about what was going on outside of the genjutsu he was in, but he wouldn't look, he'd promised. Thus, he continued drawing as he heard Teiya's music, his back pressed against hers, so that she would know if IG tried to peek. They had even had the gall to take away all his wires. He could still use senjutsu, he supposed, but that was going a little far for this, really. Still, he acquiesced with their demands. What was going on out of the illusion? His group of friends had wanted to face his team in an actual battle. It was an interesting matchup, actually. Being completely honest, IG didn't know who he would put his money on for that fight, really. Yujito could take Naruto, that much he knew. His brother might be very dangerous with seals and getting better by the day, but the two-tails Jinchuriki had him beat by experience, strength and bond with her Baijua. Hell, he could probably add a few more of his friends there and the result would be the same. They had barely managed to contain her during the invasion and that was with all of them, after all. And they still needed help in the end. They might have improved, but so had she, sadly. Jirobo vs Chaoji might be interesting, since those skill sets remained mostly unchanged. It was just that they were generally better than their canon counterparts, really. That and Chaoji not being allowed to go all out with his family pills might mean that Jirobo had the upper hand there. As for Shikamaru, he was better, but so was Teiya, and this time Tamrai was on the other side of things, sadly. Then there were Shino, Sasuke, Kiba, Ino, Hinata and Sakura. Hanabi had been exempted from the fighting, much to her dismay, but it had been a unanimous vote on the group's side. Sasori had been much the same but for completely different reasons, obviously. Kabuto, for his part, could probably take care of at the very least two of those, or Sasuke, one of those options. Basically, the group had quantity and the team had quality, although that was far from all there was to it. Back to drawing, fearless leader Taeya told him through the illusion, and IG sighed, rolling his eyes as he did as he was told. He didn't know what the big deal was, not wanting him to see, but it was what it was. So, back to drawing he went, this time making pictures of his summons, which he'd tried to spend some more time with. He'd even personally gone to their realm just to hang out. That had led to him training some more senjutsu for some reason, but he swore that he'd gone just to spend time with them and nothing else. It was mother and father's fault, really. And we are done, he heard eventually, the wind suddenly carrying the smell of battle instead of just forest. Ozone, smoke, dirt and a tinge of copper. Judging by the fact that Taeya's voice didn't sound like she'd said that through her teeth, he could guess who had won already. Storing the notebook in a scroll, IG stood and looked around. Judging by the marks on the battlefield, Yujito seemed to have taken on both Naruto and Sasuke. Jirobo had taken on Choji, Kiba and Shino. Tamrai had apparently gone against Sakura and Hinata. Ino, Shimamaru, Kabuto and Taeya seemed to have played support for all fights. Had fun? He asked, raising an eyebrow at his team. He'd give the group that, at least they had made them work for it, it seemed. Jirobo, especially, looked worse for wear. Yeah, it was easy, Taeya boasted, getting a glare from the group members that were still conscious. Something to say, little shits? She asked, throwing a very smug smirk their way. With that out of the way, IG started then, making his team turn towards him. Winner fights me, right? Silence. Were you saying something, little shit? Naruto asked then, a weary grin on his face. Oh, shut up. Oh. You can just stay outside, you know. We can entertain Sachigumo on our own for a bit, Hakai commented, but IG all but ignored her as he rubbed the chakra beast's belly. Hakai, I like spending time here as much as out with my friends. It's not a chore, you know. The boy told her, rolling his eyes. I didn't call you family just because I'm stuck with you. Well, maybe Kij. What? Said man asked from where he sat. Understandable, Hakai nodded, mock seriously as her lip twitched. Oi. But still. You can spend time here whenever. You can't do that with the people that stay at Konoha, the woman continued, giving him a soft smile. We appreciate it, but we can wait. I mean, if it were a few days or just a week, sure, IG replied as Sachigumo rolled next to him before he planted his hand on top of her head and started petting her. But more than that is pushing it. I'd miss you, guys. The adorable chakra beast barked at that, rubbing her head against his hand. He turned his focus to her completely for a moment, because, honestly, she was entirely too adorable for her own good. Besides, Hakai and Kij didn't seem to have much more to talk about for the time being anyway. Oh. Your team seems to be all right, Naruto said that night. Most everyone was inside, exchanging advice. Or that was what they were doing when IG had walked out for a bit to sit in the garden. Taeya is annoying though. You aren't telling me anything new, Naruto, he replied, not turning around as he looked at the plants he'd set in a corner, the circle used for taijutsu training, the shuriken jutsu targets against one of the walls. And, more importantly, the night sky over them. The question now is, his brother continued then, sitting next to him. Are you all right? Of course IG, Naruto interrupted, making IG's mouth click shut. I've known you for quite a bit. I can tell when you aren't doing well, you know. What gave me away? He had to ask then, giving himself a self-deprecating smile. You've been practically scrambling to spend time with everyone, Naruto noted then. We appreciate it, but we notice the difference, you know. It's like you need to do it instead of you wanting to do it. It struck him, as the blonde talked, that he'd never seen Naruto so calm. His brother was an expressive person, after all. He was happy, excited, sad, angry, but never calm. IG would be hard-pressed to find a memory of him just staying still. Even when he slept he moved around. And still, that was happening then. I'm tired, Naruto IG admitted, trying and failing to smile. I just want to stop, but I can't. I have to go on, just a bit more. You know that I wouldn't blame you if you didn't do this, right? His brother asked, smiling at him. Even Gigi wouldn't blame you, I bet. You just have to say it. Thanks, but I would blame myself, IG replied with a weary grin. I also. I'm afraid, Naruto, he admitted, looking down at his shaking hand and balling it into a fist so it would stop. I'm afraid of dying, he whispered, low enough that he didn't know if the blonde heard him. That's not a bad thing, IG Naruto reassured, and while he didn't look at him, IG knew, somehow, that he was smiling at him. It probably wasn't a happy smile though. Nobody would blame you for that either. I know that. I just. He trailed off, unsure of where he was even going with that. Then he just sighed. I can do this and then I'll just do whatever. I think I earned a vacation when all this mess is over. Sure did. Naruto nodded, although IG could tell he had more he wanted to say about that. In the end though, he just smiled as he looked up at the night sky with him. Everything all right with you? IG wondered out loud, turning to the blonde. You are acting very unlike you, honestly. I've been thinking a lot lately. Did it hurt? IG couldn't help but ask, a slight chuckle escaping him as he did so. Shut up, his brother mock growled as he playfully punched his shoulder, even as he grinned back. I didn't have anything else to do, with Gigi not letting me go out, he grumbled, looking away. Anyway, I have been, so. I realized something. Yeah. Yes. Naruto nodded. I don't need to be Hokage anymore. That was certainly not something that IG expected to hear, and his eyes demonstrated it. The fuck did I miss while I was away? He had to wonder. That was such a non-Naruto thing to say, even with the changes he'd made. I still want to, but I don't need to, the blonde continued. I wanted to be Hokage so that people would have to acknowledge me, but I realized, why did I want that anymore? I have people that do that already, you, Hinata, the group. Plenty of people, really. It is weird to notice that something I always wanted so much isn't as necessary as it seemed. I guess I can get that, IG nodded, thinking that over. Or, at least, he could imagine how that must be. If he was ever done with the world's nonsense, what would it feel like, thinking about power? He needed it now, but what would it be like when it became less necessary? I'm still gonna be Hokage, you know, Naruto said then, sounding much more like himself. Someone has to make sure you are paid well for all the crazy stuff you got to do. I'll hold you to that, Naruto. Don't think I won't, IG replied with a grin. Oh. This is fun, IG commented with a lazy grin. Fearless leader, shut up, Teiya growled. I agree with her, Tamrai said, one eye twitching. Be silent, IG was Yujito's curt addition. This is fun though, Shikamaru, the absolute legend, offered. The three women's eyes twitched. IG just ignored them and made his move on Teiya's board, before turning to Yujito's. He was currently playing shogi against the four of them at the same time. It was interesting, to say the least. He'd half expected Shikamaru to take offense, but he'd just shrugged and said that he'd take the advantage. Shogi has gone up a level. Nice, he thought, grin widening. It made things much more difficult to play like this, after all, especially with an era involved. He had a feeling that he'd be needing that sometime soon. Oh. You know you didn't have to do this, right? Ig asked, giving Sasuke a sad smile as he walked down a corridor. It was eerie, the silence that permeated the place despite being inside a village as big as Konoha. Ig could hardly mention many times when the village had been so quiet during his life there. I don't have to, the Uchiha nodded. But I want to, he added then, giving him a smile that he almost seemed to mean as he stopped at the end of the passage and opened a door. Inside, Ig saw a very extensive library. The Uchiha clan library, Sasuke announced, barely managing to keep his face neutral. Ig looked at the shelves, filled with books and scrolls, knowledge of techniques, styles, villages and anything else the Uchiha clan had ever managed to gather. He did so and he could only feel sadness. It was so vast, probably filled with more information than any village short of the 5 biggest ones had. All that, and they had ended up with nothing in the end. Only Sasuke and Itachi remained, and one of them would probably die soon, his memory tarnished for something that Ig still didn't know the truth of. He'd long since learned that his notes could be wrong, even about things that happened before his change, for lack of a better term. Sasuke, really? Just accept it, Ig. I truly don't mind, Sasuke interrupted him, a smile forming on the Uchiha's face, if only a small one. You need this, it's the least I can do. Ig regretted having mentioned that he was working on some new jutsu to add to his arsenal. Particularly the part where he said he wanted to do so with some fire release, since he was confident in his lightning. He didn't have much for his second elemental manipulation, really, and fireballs could hardly do much. He needed something more fitted for his style. Still, he'd never expected Sasuke to offer him a look into the Uchiha library, that was for sure. You know, there was a time when I disliked you, Sasuke said then, looking around the place, almost seeming nostalgic. Ig wondered if he was remembering some time when he came here with his family. He probably was, he decided. You were so good. Growing so much faster than me, and no matter how much I worked for it, I never got closer to you. Even after I started training like you did, I was still further and further away from your level. He wanted to reply something to that, and he would have, had Sasuke not continued almost immediately. But, slowly, I stopped caring about that. It stopped being important, to be the strongest around. To grow stronger than everyone else. To. The last Uchiha in Konoha stopped then, but Ig could take a guess at where that last part was going. Maybe saying that I stopped caring is wrong, he mused then, seeming distracted. I cared about other things more. Ig remained silent as his brother spoke, just leaving him to continue. Sasuke never spoke about feelings much, and everyone accepted it. Now, however, he was doing so out of his own volition. He could hardly bring himself to interrupt him. Besides, he didn't seem to be done either way, as was proved when he spoke again. I never did thank you, did I? Sasuke said, one of his hands moving up to touch a shelf in front of him, his eyes firmly on the scrolls and books. For agreeing to come to my house that day, for answering my questions, for inviting me to train with everyone. It was nothing, Sajuki replied softly. We gained as much as you. I disagree. But I know that argument will never end if we start, Sajuki commented, his lips pulling up into an almost amused smile. Regardless. Thank you, IG. Even if you wanted to thank me, which is stupid, by the way, IG said, getting a quiet snort and a shake of the Uchiha's head. You didn't have to do this. I didn't do this to thank you, which wouldn't be stupid, by the way, Sajuki shot back, turning slightly to give him a half smile. Father always said that this library was made to help the family, he explained, the grin vanishing as he turned to look at the shelves once more. He said nothing else after that though, and he didn't need to. IG understood. I thought of something, some time ago, Sajuki said then. The group had gathered and they were talking about how they would eventually have to leave their parents' houses to find their own places. Even you and Naruto, and Karen, I guess, he explained, turning to look directly at IG. I wanted to offer everyone to live in this compound. He tried to speak, he really did, but he found that the words failed him. Gulping down a knot that had suddenly formed in his throat, IG managed to speak after a moment. Sajuki. We would be honored. He wanted to say much more than that. Use more words to explain how much that meant. Thank him. Ask him if he was sure. But he knew Sajuki and he knew how much this meant. Asking anything would be almost insulting. Trying to be grateful would be dismissed. And explaining. How was he to explain, really? So, instead of speaking, he walked up to Sajuki and hugged him. It wasn't something the Uchiha would do, it wasn't even something that IG did that much. But sometimes, it was easier to tell things without words, and it was one such moment, he thought. IG was surprised though, when Sajuki hugged him back with no hesitation. Thank you, the Uchiha said then, and IG wasn't sure what he was being thanked for, but in the end, it didn't matter. That's it, guys, for now. Hope you like the video. Like, share and subscribe the channel. Thanks for watching.